Krista, you're right. That A should not be there. We'll hopefully scribble it out. There, look at that. There. Okay, so again, last time we were talking about the Battle of the Alamo and Texas gaining their own independence. We ended up with talking about the Battle of San Jacinto. San Jacinto, Texas now is their own nation. Okay, they're the Lone Star Republic. You ever have seen their flag? Chelsea, you've seen their flag, right? Texas flag with a big star on it, and then the red, white, and blue. They're the only state in the country that can fly their flag above the American flag because they were their own independent country before they became part of America. Right away. So, 1836, Texas wins their independence. Is Mexico happy?
No.
No. What are they going to want?
Their
Take them back, right? So, 1845, Texas becomes part of the United States for multiple reasons, both wanted by the Texans and by the United States, mainly because of its size and really advantageous location. You end up with having a lot more issues. Okay, now you're not just settling a border between Mexico and the Lone Star Republic, which doesn't have necessarily the greatest ability to defend themselves. You're settling a border or arguing about borders between Mexico and the United States. So you have much, much bigger problems. Okay. You also have now the problem of absorbing a country into another country. Doesn't happen very often. And usually when it does, it's because of a war, right? Yeah. I mean, you don't. It's not like you see Canada or somebody saying, "Oh, come take me." It doesn't happen. Okay? Yes, Bob.
What happened with all the people over they're kind of like China, and they're like trying to start their own independent nation because
We're talking about Hong Kong?
No, it was a smaller city towards the southern side of.
And they tried to form their own country?
Well, they were trying to form their own country, but they were already an independent thing, and then they were trying to make it part of the country, and they didn't want to do that.
Tibet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tibet, that's a lot of a very religious thing, right? And that's more on the southeast, right? Southwest, where all the Buddhists are. Yeah, Tibet said they were a free country. China says no. And then China went in really in the early part of their communist government, got rid of all the monasteries and things like that. So they still fight.
So they are part of that country now?
Yeah, and they're fighting for their independence, but they're fighting in different ways. And more contemporarily, there's a fight between China and Japan about a bunch of islands in the South China Sea that Japan has claimed and China says is theirs. It's a pain. But yeah, the Tibet, it's an interesting story. That's been going on for years and years and years. I remember in high school people driving around with free Tibet bumper stickers. Okay. So, a couple things that you see and problems that are present and resolved. Okay. You have multiple borders. And we'll look at, if you go back and look at some of those maps, you can see where the British still had holdings in Oregon, like present-day Oregon and Washington, kind of northwest. You also have the disagreement with borders between the United States and Mexico. The idea of Texas assimilation will come later. We'll talk about that more as we move on. But what happens? Well, we go to war with Mexico. We settle with the British. Okay, the Oregon Territory is divided at the 49th parallel, part of more of a treaty agreement. Oregon becomes a free state eventually, mainly because it was above the 36-30 line with the Missouri Compromise. You guys remember that? Yes? No? Yes, Sam does? Yes! Fantastic. Not so good, okay? We're almost done now. I think we got 4 left. So, I'll show you a picture of a map here, but the U.S. said that the Texas border was at the Rio Grande. Okay? Present day, that's where it is. You look at a map and find like El Paso and stuff right on the Rio Grande. The United States wanted to buy California, the California territory, which is present day California, Arizona, stuff like that from Mexico as well. Mexico didn't want to sell it. Okay, the U.S. is still pushing westward, right? They're still exploring resources. They're doing all that other stuff. They've got this idea that the continent needs to be 100% American. Okay? That we're going to control this from sea to shining sea, and that's the way it needs to be. So multiple reasons why they want to buy that territory. The biggest one is it fits kind of within that concept of manifest destiny. Okay? Questions? Yes, Kristen.
This is kind of off subject, but do you think that
So what the U.S. did is they basically took troops and occupied the areas that were contested. So they thought it was the Rio Grande, so they moved troops north of the Rio Grande. They moved troops into Canada or California and stuff like that, just to kind of provoke them into going to war, knowing that the Mexican government is fairly weak. And really, the U.S. wanted to bait them. Okay, they didn't want to come out and declare war. And you see this used a couple other times in our history, but the idea is you take an action that says you're simply protecting your interests, but while you're protecting your interests, you're also antagonizing the other people who fight, right? So they bring their troops there. Mexico looks at it as an act of war. They declare war. We fight for a while. And really, the U.S. has a plan lined up beforehand. About 12,000 Americans die. They end up controlling the Gulf of Mexico, the Santa Fe Trail, Northern California. And the war's over. Okay? The U.S. wins, and we gain land, really from Texas to California. Yes.
so we just like
What's that?
so we just had a war together because they said
Pretty much. I mean, we thought, fairly entitled to it and things like that. There's a lot of these are economically driven decisions, right? So you look at it, where you're going to expand, what are you going to need to do to expand it, and you have people that have a vision or foresight to do that. And if you have the willpower to go to war and the people to expend, they do it. That was part of a plan or a vision that they had set. You also got to understand now what's discovered in California shortly after. Gold, right? So, there's an inkling that California is minerally rich, and we don't want Mexico to get that resource if we can keep that in our borders. Does that make sense? Because figure it should be ours, right? So at the same time, you have people running around doing mineral tests and stuff like that. And there's early reports that, yeah, there's gold and silver and all that, the Comstock load, all that stuff. Okay, at the end, now the war ends with the Treaty of Guadalupe. The U.S. wins convincingly. Mexico doesn't necessarily like it. Up until World War I, they're still chasing Mexican nationals around the Texas border with Pancho Villa and all that. We get about 500,000 square miles of territory. And let me finish this real quick, guys. All those states, California, Nevada, Utah, all that. The question now becomes, do all these lands allow slavery? Okay?